I spent most of my 30s building a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt hollow on the inside. I had a good job as a charge nurse at a hospital in Charlotte, a small apartment I kept immaculately clean, and a calendar full of shifts that left me no time to think about the things I was missing. My colleagues called me dependable. My supervisor called me indispensable. I called myself tired, though never out loud, because saying it out loud would have meant admitting something I wasn't ready to face. I was 37 years old, and the last time anyone had truly needed me, not my skills, not my schedule, not my ability to stay calm in a crisis, was the night my mother died, 3 years before. After that, my brother and I drifted in the way that siblings sometimes do after they lose the person who held them together. We talked on holidays. We texted on birthdays. We never talked about what we had lost, because neither of us knew how to start that conversation without it turning into something neither of us could finish. That was the shape of my life the night everything changed. It was a Tuesday in late October, and I had just worked a 12-hour shift that ran 14 hours because we were short-staffed and 2 patients coded back-to-back, and there was simply no one else to stay. I pulled into the parking lot of the grocery store on my way home because I had nothing in my apartment except coffee and half a box of crackers, and I needed to eat something that resembled a real meal. The rain had been coming down hard since 4 in the afternoon, and by the time I parked and turned off my engine, it was the kind of steady, drumming rain that makes the world feel smaller and more exhausting than it already is. I sat there for a moment with my hands still on the wheel, just breathing. I do that sometimes, just sit in a parked car and let myself be still before I have to go be something for someone again. That's when I saw her. She was standing under the narrow overhang at the far edge of the parking lot, the part that leads to the street, not the store. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't waiting for a ride. She was just standing there in the rain with a little girl pressed against her side, and even from 30 yards away, in the dark and the wet, I could see that the child was small enough to be maybe 4 or 5 years old, and the woman was holding her so tightly that they almost looked like one person. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself I was exhausted and hungry, and the last thing I needed was to get involved in a stranger's situation. I told myself there was probably a perfectly reasonable explanation. Then I got out of the car. I pulled my jacket over my head and walked toward them, and as I got closer, I could see the details that changed things. The woman's shoes were wet through. The little girl was wearing a light jacket that wasn't made for this kind of cold. They had one bag between them, one of those large, reusable shopping bags, the kind you buy at the register, stuffed full and knotted at the top. Not luggage. Not a backpack. One bag. The woman looked up when she heard me coming. She had a face that was somewhere between beautiful and broken, the kind of face that tells you a person has been strong for too long without anyone noticing. She was maybe 30, maybe younger. She pulled the little girl closer without meaning to. "Are you okay?" I asked, which was a stupid question because she clearly wasn't, but I didn't know how else to start. She said she was fine. She said it the way people say it when they mean the opposite quickly, automatically, like a reflex. Then she looked down at her daughter, and something in her expression shifted, and she said, "Actually, no, I'm not." Her name was Renata. The little girl's name was Lily. They had been standing there for almost an hour. Her phone was dead. She had enough cash for one night at a motel, but the closest one was 4 miles away, and she had no way to get there. She didn't say what she was running from, and I didn't ask, because the one bag and the dead phone and the way she flinched slightly when a car drove past too fast told me everything I needed to know about what she was running from. I stood there in the rain thinking about the house. My mother's house had been sitting empty for 3 years. It was 20 minutes from where we were standing, a small 2-bedroom on a quiet street in a neighborhood that used to be working class and was now slowly becoming something else. After my mother died, my brother and I couldn't agree on what to do with it. He wanted to sell it quickly and split the proceeds. I couldn't make myself do it. Every time I drove out there, I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes and then drove away again. The utilities were still on. The furniture was still there. I had been paying the mortgage on an empty house for 3 years because I wasn't ready to let go of it, and in all that time, the only thing that house had held was whatever my mother left behind. I looked at Lily, who had pressed her face against her mother's arm and was watching me with eyes that were too serious for a child that small. I reached into my purse and took out my keyring. "I have a house," I said. "It's empty. You can stay there." Renata stared at me. "I'm a nurse," I said, as if that explained anything. "The house is 20 minutes from here. I'll write down the address. It's furnished, the heat works, there's food in the pantry, I keep it stocked out of habit." I paused. "You can stay as long as you need to. I'll be working doubles for the next few weeks anyway. I won't even be there." She asked me why. She asked it the way someone asks when they have learned, at some cost, not to trust things that are offered freely. I thought about it honestly. "Because you're standing in the rain with your daughter," I said. "And I can do something about that." I gave her the key. I wrote the address on the back of a grocery receipt from my glove compartment. I gave her my number and told her she could reach me anytime. I drove her and Lily to the house, walked them through the rooms, showed her where the extra blankets were and how the old thermostat worked, and left a little cash on the kitchen counter before I left. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride, exactly. More like relief. Like I had done the one right thing in a day, made entirely of hard things. I did not know that I would not think about Renata and Lily again for almost a month. I did not know that by the time I remembered, I would be desperate in a way I had never been desperate before. And I did not know that the thing I had done in a parking lot in the rain was already working its way towards saving something I didn't even know I was about to lose. My brother's name is Marcus. He is 4 years younger than me, which means he was 23 when our mother died, old enough to understand it and young enough to be undone by it. He had been living in Raleigh for 2 years, working in logistics for a company that moved industrial equipment. We had our routine, a text here, a call there, nothing too deep. I knew he was quiet. I knew he was fine in the way that people are fine when they have decided not to trouble anyone with the ways they are not. The last time I spoke to him was a Sunday afternoon in late October, 2 weeks after I gave Renata the key to my mother's house. He called me while I was folding laundry, which was unusual because he almost never called without a text first. He sounded strange. Not upset, exactly. Restless. Like a person who has something to say and keeps losing the nerve. I asked him if everything was okay. He said yes. He said he had been thinking about Mom's house and whether maybe it was time to talk about it seriously. I said we could talk about it whenever he was ready. He said okay. He said he would call me that week. He did not call that week. On the 9th of November, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman who worked with Marcus. She told me he hadn't come to work in 4 days. She said she was calling me because she had found my number in his desk and didn't know who else to contact. She said she wasn't trying to alarm me, but she thought someone in his family should know. I called his cell phone 7 times in a row. It went to voicemail every time. I called his landlord. I called the 2 friends of his whose numbers I had. One of them hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. The other said Marcus had mentioned to him, in passing, that he was thinking about getting out of Raleigh for a while, maybe going somewhere quiet to clear his head. He didn't know where. I drove to Raleigh that night after my shift ended. His apartment was locked, his car was gone, his landlord let me in with a spare key, and I walked through the rooms the way you walk through a place when you're afraid of what you might find, and I found nothing, no note, no sign of a struggle, nothing disturbed. His clothes were still in the closet. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. His laptop was on the desk. I filed a missing persons report. The officer was kind but measured. My brother was an adult. There was no evidence of foul play. Adults were allowed to leave. I knew all of this. I also knew Marcus, and Marcus did not leave without his laptop. I drove back to Charlotte at 2 in the morning and sat in my own apartment and tried to think clearly. I called in sick to work for the first time in 4 years. I made a list of every place Marcus had ever mentioned, every friend I could remember, every time he had said anything about wanting to go somewhere or get away. It was a short list. My brother was not someone who talked about his inner life, which was something we had in common and which I had never thought of as a problem until now. 3 days passed. The police found his car parked near a bus terminal in Durham. No other information. He had left the car and gone somewhere on a bus, which meant he had left voluntarily, which the officer told me was a good sign. It did not feel like a good sign. It felt like my brother had decided to disappear, and what I kept asking myself alone in my apartment at midnight, going through old texts and trying to read between the lines of every message he had sent me in the last 6 months, was why. I thought about our last call, the restlessness in his voice, the way he brought up the house. I went back and read through every message he had sent me that year, and there was a thread in March where he had mentioned the house twice in 1 week. He had said he missed it. He had said he kept dreaming about being in the kitchen. I had responded with something vague and moved on, because the house made me ache in a way I wasn't ready to look at directly, and I had assumed he was the same. But Marcus was not the same as me. Marcus did not have my habit of burying things under work and routine. Marcus sat with things. He felt them. I called the neighbor next door to my mother's house, an older woman named Mrs. Petty, who had lived on that street for 30 years and knew everything that happened within 4 blocks. I asked her, trying to keep my voice even, whether she had noticed anything at the house lately. She paused. She said, "Honey, I've been meaning to call you. There have been lights on over there. I thought maybe you finally decided to move back in." My heart stopped. "What kind of lights?" I asked. "Kitchen light, mostly. Sometimes the living room. For about a week now, maybe a little more." I had not been to the house in 6 weeks. Renata had a key, but Marcus knew where the spare key was kept. He had grown up in that house. He knew the loose brick by the back steps where our mother always kept a spare, the same brick it had been kept under since we were children. I drove there at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night in November. I drove the 20 minutes from my apartment with my hands tight on the wheel and my mind running every possible version of what I was going to find. Most of them were dark. Some of them were darker than that. I had been a nurse long enough to know what people look like when they have given up on themselves, and the thought of walking into my mother's house and finding my brother like that was something I had to keep pushing out of my mind just to stay on the road. I turned onto the street. The kitchen light was on. I sat in the driveway for a long moment. Then I got out. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly and stepped into the hallway, and the smell hit me first. Not anything wrong, but something that surprised me. Something cooking. Something warm. I walked to the kitchen doorway and stopped. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table. He had a cup of coffee in front of him, and he looked up when I came in with an expression that moved through surprise and relief and shame all at once. He was unshaven and thinner than the last time I had seen him, and his eyes had the flat, exhausted look of a person who has not been sleeping. But he was there. He was sitting in our mother's kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, and he was alive, and I had to grip the doorframe for a moment before I could say anything. "Marcus," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "I'm sorry," he said. He said it immediately, before anything else. "I know I scared you. I needed to be here. I didn't know how to explain that to anyone." I sat down across from him. I did not yell. I wanted to, briefly, but the wanting passed quickly because I could see, sitting across from him, that whatever had brought him here had been real and serious and not something I should make smaller by being angry at the wrong thing. "Tell me," I said. He told me. He had been struggling since the spring. Not with anything dramatic, nothing that would show up on the outside, something quieter and more corrosive. He had stopped feeling like anything mattered. He had gone to work and come home and gone to work again, and somewhere along the way the routine had stopped feeling like a life and started feeling like a waiting room. He had not told me because he knew I worried, and because he knew I was busy, and because there is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from feeling like your pain is too ordinary to mention. He had started thinking about our mother a lot in October. He had started dreaming about her kitchen, her coffee, the specific quality of the light in the late afternoon in that house. He had not known what to do with that except drive there. "I was just going to come for a night," he said, "to sit here, to feel like she wasn't completely gone." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "And then I got here, and the house wasn't empty." I looked at him. "There was a woman here," he said, "and a little girl. They were scared when I showed up." The woman grabbed the girl and backed against the wall. I had to show her the photos on my phone to prove I was related to the person who owns the house. He almost smiled. "The little girl's name is Lily. She's 4. She told me I look like someone from a cartoon." Renata. I had not thought about Renata in 3 weeks. I had been paying the mortgage on that house and going through the motions of my life, and I had completely, shamefully forgotten that there was a woman and a child living in my mother's house. She told me what happened, Marcus said. How you found them, what you did. He was quiet for a moment. She's been taking care of the place, cleaning it. She planted something in Mom's garden, some kind of herb, I don't know which one. She said she wanted to earn the space. Something tightened in my chest. She made me dinner the first night, Marcus said. She didn't have to. But she could see I was in bad shape, I think. She's good at seeing that. He looked at me. We talked. For a long time. She told me about what she'd been through, where she came from, why she left, and I told her about Mom. About how I hadn't been able to talk about it. He paused. It was the first real conversation I'd had in months. I thought about the parking lot. The rain. The way Lily had pressed her face against her mother's arm and watched me with those two serious eyes. Where are they now? I asked. Asleep, he said. Lily insisted on the room with the yellow curtains. She said it smelled like cookies. He looked at me. I should have called you. I know I should have called you. I needed a few days to feel like myself again before I was ready to explain anything to anyone. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. He was 33 years old, and he looked, in that moment, like he had when he was 12 and our father had left and he hadn't known yet how to process something that large. I understood that. I had the same thing inside me. I had just been better at hiding it, which was not the same as being okay. You're going to call someone, I said. A professional. I'll help you find someone. He nodded. He didn't argue, which told me he had already been thinking about it. And you're going to stop disappearing, I said. From me. You don't have to be fine. You just have to tell me when you're not. He nodded again. His jaw moved in the way it does when he's holding something back. I missed her, he said. His voice broke slightly on the last word. I just missed her so much and I didn't know where to put it. I know, I said. Me too. We sat in our mother's kitchen until past midnight, drinking coffee and talking, really talking, for the first time in 3 years. I told him about the hollow feeling I'd been carrying. He told me about the dreams. We talked about our mother the way we should have been talking about her for years, not around the loss but through it, and somewhere around 1 a.m, the kitchen felt less like a place full of absence and more like a place full of her, the way it used to. I heard a small sound in the doorway. Lily was standing there in a pair of pajamas with little foxes on them, holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She looked at me with the careful, measuring expression of a child who has learned to read rooms quickly. Are you the lady who gave Mama the key? She asked. I am, I said. She considered this for a moment. Then she walked over and climbed up into the chair next to Marcus as if she had been doing it for years, tucked the rabbit under her arm, and looked at me with great seriousness. Mama cried when she found out someone was missing, she said. She said we had to find you to say thank you. I looked at her. What do you mean, honey? When the man came. She gestured at Marcus. Mama said the lady who owns this house must be missing her brother, and we should help find him. She wanted to call you. She looked at Marcus, but he said he needed 1 more day. Marcus had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I looked at Lily, this 4-year-old girl in fox pajamas, who had apparently been living in my mother's house and eating in my mother's kitchen and sleeping in the room with the yellow curtains, and I thought about the strange, winding path that had led us all to this table at 1 a.m, a Tuesday in October, a parking lot, a rain that wouldn't stop, a key on a key ring that I had taken off and handed to a stranger without knowing what I was putting in motion. Renata appeared in the doorway behind Lily. She was wearing a sweater I recognized it had been my mother's, a soft gray cardigan that used to hang on the hook by the back door. She looked at me with an expression that was careful and grateful and slightly braced, like someone who expects to be asked to leave. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I should have called you when he showed up. I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. You kept him from leaving, I said. She looked at me. He would have left, I said. He was going to come for 1 night and leave, and he would have gone back to Raleigh and back to everything he was trying to get out of. You kept him here. You fed him and talked to him, and you kept him here long enough for me to find him. She was quiet. You don't need to apologize for that, I said. Lily had fallen asleep in the chair with her head against Marcus's arm, still holding the rabbit. He looked down at her with an expression of such surprised tenderness that I had to look away for a moment. Later, after Marcus had carried Lily back to the room with the yellow curtains, and Renata had gone to make a fresh pot of coffee, moving through my mother's kitchen with a familiarity that should have felt wrong and somehow didn't, I stood in the hallway and looked at the photographs on the wall. My mother at 30, my mother and my father before he left, Marcus at 8, missing both front teeth, grinning at something off camera, me at 12, already serious, already looking like I was trying to figure out what came next. I had not been able to sell this house. I had spent 3 years telling myself it was grief, sentiment, and inability to let go. Standing there in the hallway at 1:30 in the morning, I thought maybe it was something else. Maybe something in me had known that this house still had something to do, that it wasn't finished being a place where people needed to go. Renata came to stand beside me. She handed me a cup of coffee and looked at the photographs. "Your mother looks kind," she said. "She was," I said. She was the kind of person who would have done exactly what I did in that parking lot without thinking twice. She would have handed over the key before I'd even finished telling the story. Renata was quiet for a moment. "My mother was not like that," she said simply, without bitterness, just as a fact. I looked at her. I thought about what it must have taken to stand in a parking lot in the rain with your child and not move, not ask for help, just wait and endure what it means when asking for help has never been safe, when kindness has always come with a cost. "You can stay," I said, "as long as you need to. I mean it this time. I mean it with full awareness, not just a reflex in a parking lot." She turned to look at me. "I'm not going to sell this house," I said. "I think I've known that for a while. I just needed to understand why." I looked back at the photographs. There's a room that's been empty. Marcus is going to stay for a while too. He needs to be somewhere that doesn't feel like the place he was trying to escape from. We're going to figure out the rest as we go. I expected her to hesitate, to qualify, to list the reasons she shouldn't accept. Instead, she said, quietly, "I've been looking for work. I have a background in early childhood education. I've been applying." "Okay," I said. "I want to contribute," she said. "I don't want to be someone you rescued. I want to be someone who lives here." "Okay," I said again. Lily's voice came from down the hall, small and sleepy. "Mama?" Renata moved toward the sound. She paused in the doorway of the hall. "Thank you," she said. Not the quick, reflexive version from the parking lot. This one was slower and came from somewhere deeper. "Get some sleep," I said. I stood in my mother's hallway for a long time after she went. The house was quiet in the way that a house is quiet when it is full of sleeping people, a different quiet than empty, weighted differently, alive in a way that absence is not. I could hear the rain starting up again outside, the same steady drumming that had been falling the night I found Renata and Lily, and I thought about how much can turn on a single moment, a parking lot, a car you sit in just a little too long before going inside. A choice you make because you are tired and your judgment is soft around the edges and something in you is too exhausted to talk yourself out of the right thing. My brother was asleep in the room down the hall. He would call a therapist in the morning because I would sit with him until he did. We would talk about our mother the way we should have been talking for 3 years, and it would hurt, and we would do it anyway because the alternative was the kind of silence that hollows people out from the inside. A woman I had known for 6 weeks was sleeping in my mother's gray cardigan in the room my mother used to read in on Sunday mornings. She had planted something in my mother's garden. She had made my brother dinner. She had kept him in the house one more day when he was ready to vanish again, because she recognized, in the particular way that people who have had to develop that skill, someone who needed to be seen. I thought about what Lily had said. The lady who gave Mama the key. I thought about the night I sat in the parking lot in the rain and told myself it wasn't my business and then got out of the car anyway. I thought about my mother and what she would have said about all of this. Probably something short and certain, the way she always talked. Something that made you feel like the answer had been obvious all along and you had only needed someone to say it plainly. Something like, "You can't hold on to a house and a house can't hold on to you, but you can open the door, and sometimes that's enough." I went to the kitchen and rinsed out my coffee cup and turned off the light. I walked down the hall past the room with the yellow curtains where Lily was breathing slowly in the dark with her rabbit, and past the room where Marcus was asleep for the first time in weeks without the restless, chasing quality that exhaustion takes on when the mind won't stop running. I went to the room that had been my parents' room, the room where I had never let myself sleep since my mother died because it still smelled faintly like her, and I lay down on top of the covers in my clothes and looked at the ceiling. For the first time in a very long time, the house did not feel like a loss. It felt like what it had always been. It felt like home.